Well, Jamie, Dannhauser joins me now. He's an economist at Lombard Street Research here in London. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Now, you argue that it's just getting back to its old tricks, and China's recovery, although sustainable, may not be maybe the best for the rest of the world.
Well, the numbers we've had today have been very good news for China, and it's clear that the short-term recovery is going to be strong and continue into 2010. But if we look at what caused this crisis, it was very much a story of excess savings in China, promoting an asset bubble and a debt bubble in the US. And unfortunately, today's numbers sort of indicate we're pretty much back to that story again. Export volumes in December were up about 15 to 20%, depending on how you adjust them. Imports even more. So there's clearly a lot of domestic demand in China. But the problem is, who is China exporting to? And the clear story is that Japan and Germany, the world's other two big exporters, are really struggling to compete in a much smaller pie.
Jamie, are we being too harsh on China? A lot of the times we say, well, they're not rebalancing, they're not actually increasing the value of the yuan, but at the same time, it takes time.
Absolutely, but the problem for China is they have been following policies over the last 5 years that have deliberately balanced their economy towards exports, keeping the currency cheap, and other kind of tax measures to promote exports. And the problem is this can be very dangerous to the world economy. We cannot get back to a situation of excess savings pouring out of China, fueling a bubble in the US. Simply now can't occur. The private sector has finished its ability to take on more debt. That's temporarily moved to the government sector, but clearly the ability of governments to keep expanding deficits is going to come to an end at some point. And 2010 will probably be that end. And there's a real question mark on how sustainable this mode of growth is going to be in a world where there's just simply no more capacity in the deficit economies to take on debt.
So, Jamie, what will it take to change this trend? When will China actually become a consuming country instead of an exporting one?
Well, I think there's sometimes in the West we're a bit harsh on China in forcing them to move to a consumer-led economy before it's humanly possible. But clearly there does need to be a change of tack in Beijing, only in particular on the
tack through political pressure?
Political pressure, yes, but it's also clearly got to come through on the approach towards the currency, towards the domestic banking sector, and domestic taxation as well. There's a clear bias against consumer-facing sectors, and we really need to get that rebalance away from the export sectors to domestic producing sectors.
And what will it actually take, apart from the political will, if it were to rebalance?
Well, political will is a pretty important part of it. Beijing is clearly not showing any signs of wanting to move in that direction. If they are, they're moving extremely slowly. Clearly, reform of domestic land entitlement in China is a massive part of that. Domestic reform of the welfare system as well, unemployment provision, pension provision. There are lots of policies that can be undertaken. They're going to take time, but Beijing does need to move quicker.
In terms of the growth, Jamie, I mean, it seems incredible. 16% growth, 17%. Is it just going a little bit too fast for their own good?
Probably. I mean, but you're referring probably to the year-on-year numbers. If you actually just look at the movement in December over November, it's been even more staggering. Import volumes are up about a quarter in 1 month. And there could be some Christmas-related factor there. But, you know, clearly things are moving very rapidly. China's imports of commodities are absolutely soaring still. Probably some indication of why the commodity markets have held up better than people might have expected. But the numbers are pretty startling.
And which is great, though, for our economies, because they're essentially the ones that got us out of this recession almost.
Well, to an extent, but they're not offering much to the rest of the world in terms of pulling those countries that need to be pulled along with it. China's doing a lot for its own economy, but unfortunately it's not doing much to drag the rest of the world out of its slump.
Jamie, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.